everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. If you want to go ahead and grab your Bible if you're able, and if you'd like to, and we will be looking at Proverbs chapter 6, verse 24. And we're going to continue in what is Solomon's third warning against immorality and sexual sin. And little different perspective that he's going to take here. Previously, he had warned his son about immoral women, evil women, sexual sin in general. In this section, he's going to be specific and warn his son about the danger of being involved with another man's wife, and so he is a little more specific here. And again, this is the third time that Solomon has addressed this in some fashion in a rather lengthy section, and I think it just shows us again the importance of avoiding immorality. Solomon understood that perhaps nothing could ruin his son's life more than any form of immorality. And so we're going to move kind of quickly today because we've got I want to cover this whole section. He tells him in verse 24 to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. And what we have is Solomon begins warning his son at the point where typically we know that immorality begins. It begins with words. It begins with flirtatious words, and then moves on. In verse 25, lust not after her beauty in thy heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. And so he's saying to him, don't be captured by the beauty. Again, the action that Solomon is warning about, we know, starts with a small fault, that first glance, that first little interaction, and it begins to grow. And so he's warning his son to be careful in that regard. And then he goes on and he says he's going to tell him some of the danger of that. Now that he's warned him about it, beginning in verse 26, he says, for by means of a whorish woman, a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. And so a couple things that he's saying there to us. He's saying that immorality, adultery with a married woman is more dangerous than even with a prostitute because of the destruction that it brings, and that it can bring him down to nothing. Solomon says it can ruin every aspect of his life. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Many of us are familiar with that passage. Can one go upon hot coals and his feet not be burned? And he is just reminding his son, we use the phrase a lot of times in our day, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. And he says the same thing is true. So he that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whosoever toucheth her shall not be innocent. And it's the same. He's comparing that, using that comparison between taking, if you play with fire, you get burned. If you mess with your neighbor's wife, you're going to be in trouble. There's grave danger in that. He warns his son about, and tells him it can be extremely dangerous. Can you take fire in your bosom and not be burned? That you're going to eventually get the trouble will eventually catch up to you, and you'll be burned by it. And again, we see that all over our culture today, whether it's in the celebrity world or in just the ordinary world. How many lives are ruined in this manner? So he that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whosoever toucheth her, shall not be innocent. Men, do not despise a thief if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore sevenfold. He shall give all the substance of his house. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. He's comparing it. He says that it's comparing it, the danger here. He says it's extremely foolish. It's extremely dangerous. He says if a man's hungry and he steals, most people will kind of overlook that crime. If he's hungry and he steals, and especially if he repays and pays it back what he has taken. But this thief, because he's hungry, because he's desperate, is generally not despised in society. But he says a man that commits adultery with another man's wife, he says he doesn't get that same benefit. He doesn't get that same compassion, because there's no way he can make restitution. The hungry man that steals can always pay back what he stole. But he says if you get involved in this way with another man's spouse or another woman's husband, he says you can't pay that back. You can't make up for that. And it's just, he says it's in verse 32, he's saying how foolish it is. He says he lacks understanding. He just doesn't understand what he's getting into, and the danger the dangerous situation that he is putting himself in when he commits this kind of action, when he goes out and lives in that way. And he says in verse 33, he says the wounds that the scars, the damage that is done, he says they're permanent. And he describes in roundabout ways, says those scars may actually be real scars, because the wife's husband may put a beating on you, may come from God, but then there's the disgrace, the shame that comes for the rest of their life because of that action. Again, verse 34, he goes on and says you'll deal with the anger of the other spouse. He'll be jealous. He'll be angry. He'll be provoked to fight, and he'll hold nothing back in getting his revenge. Again, there's just no way to pay that back. And this is a very serious warning that Solomon gives his son, and is telling him of the danger that comes from that, the risk that comes from that. And so, as we consider this warning, again, like previous warnings that we've looked at in this section, there's two important aspects to it. First of all is that we guard ourselves, that we're cautious and careful, that we avoid situations and putting ourselves in places where that temptation may arise. And then that we warn our young people, that we start teaching our children early about the dangers of immorality. I think many times we're a little bit afraid to do that. We don't want to, a little embarrassed to talk about these issues to our children. But my thought would be, and what I see in being around young people is you're not going to tell them much they hadn't already heard. You're not going to say much to them they're not already familiar with, that they haven't heard talked about in the schools, that they haven't seen on television and their movies, and that so we need to start early, warning and teaching our children about being faithful, being moral, and avoiding immorality, adultery at all cost. And again, setting that example, being that model for them as well. Think about this passage. Man, is it relevant in our day? And you have a good day today, and we'll see you here tomorrow morning. Have a good day.